In the 13th century Persia, a mystic dervish embarks on a long journey to find his twin soul, Rumi, who has been revealed to him divinely in a dream. He has longed for a companion who truly understands him and can articulate his insights. Their meeting creates a connection so deep and intense that it transcends both time and space. The presence and teachings of Shams of Tabriz catalyzed a transformation in Rumi's life, work, and beliefs, allowing his poetic genius to flourish. The end of this fellowship is shrouded in mystery and speculation, with some theories suggesting a possible murder. However, what is certain is the deep spiritual love and respect they shared, as reflected in Rumi's collection of poems dedicated to Shams, known as the Divan-e Shams, and in the articles written by Shams's students, known as the Magalat. In this documentary, we aim to understand and explore their profound fellowship and teachings.
Jalaluddin Rumi was born in 1207 in Balkh to an affluent family. Due to the Mongol invasion and the ensuing turmoil in Balkh, his family moved to Konya in 1215.
On the Rumi side, it turns out that he is descendant from a long line of Sufis, extraordinary lovers of God, lovers of humanity, that his own father, Baha'u'llah, was someone with an extraordinary visionary experience. It is sensual, it is erotic. He has a very vivid imagination of his love for God and the love for humanity. Rumi's already a lover and a poet before meeting Shams.
Around 1230, Rumi's father, Bahauddin Walad, passed away, and Rumi took over his position as the head of religious sciences at the largest theological school in Konya.
Like Geoffrey Chaucer in 14th century England, Rumi drew his inspiration from his predecessors, the two major Persian Sufi poets from whom Rumi borrowed were Sanai of Ghazni and Fariduddin Attar of Nayshabur. Rumi asseverates his indebtedness to these two poets in a distich. Attar ruh bud o Sanai do cheshme o. Ma az pey Sanai و Attar آمدیم.
By the time Rumi met Shams of Tabriz, he was already a well-known scholar and a poet. He had two sons, Sultan Walad and Alauddin Chalabi, from his first wife, Gohar Khatun, who had passed away. He also had two other children from his second marriage. There are two main biographies of Rumi. One was written by Sepah Salar, who was a disciple of Rumi. The other one, based on the oral tradition of the time, and a student of Rumi's grandson, احمد افلاکی.
مولانا رو نباید دست کم گرفت، یعنی که تقریباً 40 سال شاگردی کرد. شاگرد پدرش بود، شاگرد برهان الدین محقق بود. بعداً خودش مثلا شیخ شده بود، ولی چه جد و جهدی، چه زحماتی که مولانا نکشید برای اینکه بتونه به اون مرتبه‌ای برسه که شمس بتونه بهش خودش رو نشون بده.
As for Shams, it's not so much the case that he was this punk before meeting Rumi. Shams was also a scholar of the madrasa system, a university system. He was highly learned. In addition to his native Persian, he also had a full command over Arabic. He had studied the Quran, the teachings of the Prophet, law.
Shams Tabrizi was an enigmatic figure. Some claim that he was illiterate. Others, on the other hand, believe that he was very learned and that he was knowledgeable about mathematics and astronomy.
Shams from Tabriz, of course, the son of Tabriz, Shams being the Arabic for the sun. What an astounding person, what an unusual person he was, and I would say his impact on Rumi was immense.
The true dirt is not on the outside, but inside, within our hearts. All stains can be washed away with water, except for the grudges and bad intentions that cling to our hearts.
Shams was a really devoted dervish on the path, and a real seeker of truth. He was very direct and very clear on this, and he also was very unconventional. And he grew up really not interested in when he was a child, not interested in what children were interested in. And when he talks about his own life, he says that he was a duck raised by chickens, belonged to the water, not to the earth. He was also a very fierce teacher from the very beginning. When he in the maqalat, he talks about how whenever parents would send children to him to learn, he would be very harsh with them, and that was his way of taming their egos. And not many people could stand this kind of energy and this kind of intensity that he had. And that's what caused him to seek out Mawlana Rumi, because what he carried in his heart, it was very hard for people to receive it. So he went seeking someone he could share that with, and he couldn't find anybody until he met Rumi.
Reliable accounts of Shams's life are limited. It is believed that he was born around 1185 in Tabriz, and he was the son of an imam. Shams received his education in Tabriz and was a disciple of Baba Kamaluddin Jundi. He traveled from place to place, earning a living by weaving baskets, which gave him the nickname Shams the Bird. The only reliable source that provides information about Shams's life is the Maqalat.
The Maqalat, which is a recording of his conversations, presented almost like a stream of consciousness. There's no indication really of moments of change of day or time or who was there. But there was a tradition that people would write down what was being said. Mm-hmm. And so we have that record.
زبان شمس زبانی بود که من منقلب کرد قبل از همه چیز. خود اصل زبان شمس یه چیز نشنیده و ندیده بود. یه آدمی که میگه خوشم چنان خوشم که در دو جهان نمی گنجم. یه آدمی که همچین حرفی میزنه یه دنیایی درش برای آدم باز میکنه و یه جوری حرف میزنه که مثل آدم تجدید حیات میکنه. و مقالات شمس این کار رو با من کرد. مقالات شمس منو لیروزه بر کرد. صحبت شمس عالی ترین شعر آزاده.
Most conflicts and tensions arise from language. Pay less attention to words. In the realm of love, language is irrelevant. Love is silent.
در مقالات ما می‌بینیم که شمس توضیح میده که از خدا خواسته بوده سالها قبل که با یکی از اولیاش او رو آشنا بکنه. دنبال کسی بوده که بتونه این عشقی که در او بوده، این حقیقتی که در او بوده، این نوری که ازش خود شمس سرشار بوده، همه اینا رو بتونه به یک کسی انتقال بده، به یک کسی اینها رو نمیگم بفهمونه، ولی یه جوری آب شیرینش روان بشه. این استعارم خود مال خود شمسه، گفته دلم میخواست که این آبی روان بشه. یه چیزی در دلم بود که میخواستم این رو با یه کسی واقعا با یه کسی در میون بگذارم، هم صحبت پیدا بکنم، همدم پیدا بکنم. چقدر این کلمه همدم زیباست در زبان فارسی.
You know, he had been searching and asking for someone with whom to share the depth of his being and truth.
Shams has spent his whole life longing and yearning for companionship. He always felt like he was kind of a spiritual loner. He was missing the kind of partnership that he was seeking. And so he has a vision one night, a dream, in which God says to him, "Good news, there is one of my sweethearts, Nazanin, one of my dear ones. He will be the one to get you."
Shams traveled from Persia and went west into Anatolia and eventually came to Konya, which was the capital of the Seljuk Empire at that time.
He goes to Turkey, what is today Turkey, back then the Seljuk Empire. And he asks for where Mawlana is, and he intercepts Rumi and his students coming back from the class. He goes up, and in this place, which today is known as the merging of the two oceans, he holds on to the reins of this noble steed, and he says, "Who was greater, Muhammad, the Prophet, or the great Sufi Bayezid Bastami?" And Rumi looks at him and says, "What kind of a silly question is this? Of course the Prophet Muhammad is greater than any of the sages. He's the greatest of all the prophets." And there's different versions of the story. In some of them, the question itself is like a Zen koan that knocks Rumi out. In some versions, it's Shams's answer that knocks him out. And Shams's answer is, in that case, why is it that Muhammad, the Prophet, peace be upon him, says at one point, "My Lord, we have not known you as you deserve to be known." Whereas Bayezid says, "Glory be to me. Subhani, glory be to me." How is it that the Prophet says, "We don't even know God the way that God deserves to be known," but Bayezid says, "Glory be to me," right? Glory belongs only to God. It's as if God is speaking through Bayezid. And Mawlana sometimes describes this question as feeling a column of fire and of heat rising through him, through the highest of the latifas, the chakras, almost frying his brain and knocking him out. And he realizes that mere rational discourse is not going to have the answer here. That it calls for a different kind of knowing, a different mode of tasting. And the answer that Shams gives him is, of course Muhammad is greater. But you see, Muhammad is an oceanic being. And the more you pour into an ocean, the more room there is. That the ocean is expansive, is infinite. Whereas Bayezid, dear, wonderful, beautiful, wise Bayezid, was like a vase, and some water was poured into him, and he started to overflow. And what we hear from him is that overflowing sense of God.
This question stumped Rumi. He didn't know what to say. And it happens, this is like a way of teaching of great spiritual masters, where they will ask a question that interrupts the logical thinking of the student, where they can't reason. They're unable to reason their way to an answer, you know? And this is what happened in the case of Rumi. The way he says it is that his tongue was tied. He couldn't come up with an answer to this question. And he felt helpless. And so he turned to God and asked for help and said, help me, I don't know what to do. And then suddenly his heart opened, and an answer came like a thunderbolt in his heart that he could never have reasoned on his own or come up with by thinking about the question. And this is what he said to Shams. He said, because Bayezid took one sip from the divine cup and was sated. And the Prophet's heart was so vast that no matter how much he received, there was always room in his heart for more. And then he collapsed.
خیلی خوب قصه هایی گفتن راجع به برخوردشون در قونیه خیلی زیباست، خیلی مهمه، خیلیاش به صورت اسطوره الان شده، مثلا که مثلا شمس مثلا کتابا رو میندازه تو آتیش یا میندازه تو آب، خلاصه یه حالت معجزه‌آسا پیدا کرده که البته به نظر من بهترین داستان همون داستانی که خود شمس تعریف میکنه که میگه که در بازار قونیه مولانا رو دید و اون وقت ازش یه سوالی کرد و مولانا بیهوش شد. در تمام داستانایی که تعریف میکنن میگن که مولانا در اثر حرف زدن شمس، وقتی که شمس به حرف آمد، ازش سوال کرد یا یه چیزی گفت یا یه کاری کرد، هر کاری باشه یا هر گفتاری باشه، مولانا بیهوش میشه. یعنی چی این؟ یعنی که یک چیزی میبینه، یک تشعشعی میبینه از اون وجود، یک تشعشعیش مولانا میدید از وجود شمس که اصلا بیهوش میشه، یعنی عقل رباس. اتفاقا اینا باید در رابطه بذاریم با دژ هوشربا که قصهش در آخرین قصه مثنوی در دفتر ششم، آخر دفتر ششم آمده. اون 3 شاهزاده‌ای که میرن در دژ هوشربا. این خیلی جالبه. و تجربه عشق رو آدم در دژ هوشربا میکنه. اصلا تجربه عشق فقط و فقط میتونه با بیهوشی شروع بشه. تجربه عشق ضمناً منجر به بیهوشی هم میشه. یعنی واقعا این دوتا با هم دیگه رابطه مستقیم دارن. و شمس کاری که میکنه اینه. یعنی این حالت رو در مولانا ایجاد میکنه که مولانا هوش عادی معمولیش رو از دست میده و میتونه اون وقت وارد عالم عشق بشه یا وارد عوالم عشق بشه، چون عشق فقط یک عالم نداره، عوالم متعددی داره.
عشق است بر آسمان پریدن، 100 پرده به هر نفس دریدن. ای مرغ بگو زبان مرغان، من دانم رمز تو شنیدن. من دانم رمز تو شنیدن.
Shams was like the spark that lit the fire. I mean, Rumi was like a smoldering ember, and then there was spark that just made a huge bonfire. Of course, he was mystically inclined and everything, couldn't be otherwise, but he was a scholar, and Shams just blew him out of the water,
He fell into an ecstatic trance But the wonderful thing, Shams says, and so did I. Okay. So they both fell into an ecstatic trance. And this, in my opinion, is the most accurate version of what happened. They immediately could not be without one another. The proof of their love was that it was not like one was running that show. It was they both had fallen into the deep spiritual love, and they immediately went and were in retreats. And in fact, some people say they stayed longer than the 40 days, and they certainly stayed months together, to the chagrin of Rumi's many students.
Rumi and Shams enter into a special kind of fellowship. It is what the sources refer to as sohbat. Sohbat in modern Persian just means talking. Sohbat kardan, we're talking. But in classical Persian, and especially in the Sufi tradition, it's really fellowship. It's that kind of full presence when two beings start to mirror one another. And so what happens between Mawlana Rumi and Shams is sohbat, it's fellowship. They retreat into a chamber where they are present to one another. They're exchanging what God is teaching each one of them. Right? This is not a time for chit-chat. It's a time of mirroring. A relationship between two mirrors, each one of which is polished. If Mawlana is a mirror for Shams, and Shams is a mirror for Mawlana, when the two of them step into that space with their full presence, their being is reflected onto infinity, which is to say, onto God. They see God everywhere. God is present, infinity is present, divinity is present, love pervades. Love pervades.
Shams was pure power. Rumi was beauty and eloquence. Rumi immediately recognized in him a spiritual authority that could only come directly from the divine. And Shams himself said that he really hadn't done much study or even spiritual disciplines, and yet he was given gifts, spiritual gifts. It was as if Shams had to be educated by the unseen for a particular task, carrying a profound message, carrying, you might say, a cosmic energy. These two met. They were necessary to each other. They were essential to each other. Shams says, if I have any greed, Rumi is enough for me. I need nothing more. Because Rumi came and he put himself before me like a child, waiting to be instructed, even though he was the most brilliant, the most educated person of his time. So that was their relationship. But there was no superiority, inferiority in this relationship because it was based in love. And love levels the playing field. In love, there is no sheikh and no dervish. There is no superiority or inferiority.
I don't think they looked at each other as master and student so much. You know, there's an interesting anecdote where a messenger came to Konya one time while they were together, and he said, he came to them and he said, Sheikh so-and-so has passed away in some other city, and we need to send another teacher. So Shams said to him, go and talk to this person. He'll be able to, he's a good teacher. He'll be able to help you. And then he turned to Mawlana and he said, it's a good thing he didn't come and ask for a dervish, because then one of us would have to go.
Personalities are different. Their qualities are different. Shams, at one point, you can see this with a twinkle in his eye, with a smile on his face. He says, everybody loves Mawlana. Look at him. Everywhere he goes, he's surrounded by people who love him. He says, he is like moonlight. The light of the moon is soft, it is gentle, it is comforting. The moon borrows its light and reflects the light of the sun. And the Arabic and Persian word for sun is Shams. And Shams, in this beautiful pun on his own name, says, I am the Shams. Don't try staring at me, I'll blind you. I'm too intense, I'm fierce. If you want to stare at something, go look at Mawlana, go look at the moonlight. He is soothing and comforting. I am fierce and intense, but know that our light is one light. That's the relationship that we have between Mawlana Rumi and between Shams.
وقتی آدم مقالات شمس رو واقعاً عمقاً میخونه، متوجه میشه که نه تنها شمس مولانا رو دوست داشته، اما برعکس اون چه که خیلی وقتا آدم میشنوه، فکر میکنم که شمس خیلی بیشتر مولانا رو دوست داشته تا مولانا. البته میدونم که یه حالت پارادوکس داره اینی که میگم، به دلیل وسعت شعرهایی که مولانا راجع به شمس نوشته، به دلیل اصلا معروف شدن شمس در این عشقی که مولانا بهش می‌ورزیده، به دلیل اون شور و شوقی که مولانا در اشعارش نشون میده، چه البته در دیوان شمس که این خیلی واضحه و چه در مثنوی که شاید یه کمی پوشیده تره، با علی‌رغم اینها فکر میکنم که وقتی آدم با دقت مقالات رو میخونه، متوجه میشه که همه اینها رو اصلا مولانا از شمس داره. اول از همه چیز شمس مولانا رو دوست داشته، یعنی عشق ورزیده به مولانا و این باعث شده که وجود مولانا سرشار بشه از عشق.
سلطان منی سلطان منی و اندر دل و جان ایمان منی، در من بدمی من زنده شوم، یک جان چه بود صد جان منی.
According to Dr. Mohammad Reza Shafi'i Katkani, what we do know about Shams is that in 1244 CE, he enters Konya. He stays there for 16 months, and afterwards, he exits the city.
So what we know is that he left twice. He left only after the first time was only after a couple of years of the encounter with Rumi. And it was because there was so much criticism and jealousy and resentment about this newcomer who came and basically took over Rumi. And they would spend so much time together in seclusion that the followers of Rumi felt left out. And because of this, Shams decided to leave for Damascus the first time. He went to Damascus to kind of relieve Rumi from the pressure of all of the public criticisms and questions and things like that.
So imagine this. Mawlana is this beloved teacher in Konya. Many students have come from all over the world to study with him. And they're not there simply to learn a subject matter. They're there for him. right? This is a tradition in which the wisdom of the ancients is embodied in people who bring these teachings to life. They're there to see him live out these ancient teachings. And for a while they get to do that. For a while they get to attend classes with him, and then shows up Shams. Then Mawlana Rumi and Shams want to go sit in this private chamber of sohbat, of fellowship. There they disappear into exchanging divine secrets, which is great for them and not so great for the students. So one of Rumi's sons, Sultan Walad, openly talks about the jealousy that existed among Rumi's followers. He also quotes Shams as recognizing this jealousy. He says, it's possible that there's some bad blood that's brewing. It's possible that they might want to do something to me one day. We know that Shams runs away to Syria, whether it's Aleppo or Damascus, is a little up for debate. And Rumi does everything in his power to bring him back.
When Shams absented himself, twice, he left and went to Damascus, and Rumi was distraught, that his friend was gone, and was searching for him. And at last his son went and brought him back, and he returned, and such a joy. And Shams said, it didn't matter to me where I was. It was really for the further cooking of your own soul, that my absence took place, so that we could go even deeper.
Shams returns for a while. There's joy, there's ecstasy, there's concerts, gatherings filled with music and poetry.
شمس و قمرم آمد، سمع و بصرم آمد. وان سیم برم آمد، وان کان زرم آمد. وقت است که می نوشم تا برق زند هوشم. وقت است که برپرم چون بال و پرم آمد.
And according to that Rumi's biography, again, the second one, Aflaki, the same old feelings of jealousy return. And that biography tells us that Rumi's own son, Alauddin, is the person who spearheads the murder of Shams. According to this, 6 or 7 of them come. Shams knows that they have come for him. One of them is Alauddin, Rumi's own son. Shams lets out a cry or a scream. All the people faint. Their daggers have been drawn. They've been ready to kill him. They faint, and when they come to be, there's no sign of the body of Shams. There's just drops of blood on the floor. Where is Shams? What's happened to him? Is he alive? Is he dead? No one knows. He's never to be seen again.
اگه ما فکر کنیم که شمس به یه معنا مظهر الله بوده، اصلا نمیتونم فکر بکنم که کسی بتونه بندازتش توی چاه و مولانا هیچی از این موضوعات ندونه، مولانا نفهمه که مثلا حالا یه کسی شمس رو کشته. اصلا به نظر من کاملا غیر واقعی میاد این داستانهایی که تعریف میکنن راجع به شمس.
Here's the only indication that we have that there was something malicious, something odious about what the son had done, Alauddin. That son, who had been very loved by Rumi before, Rumi had written many prayers for him, he'd written letters to other officials in praise of that son, and then comes this episode, and that son gets sick and dies, and Rumi refuses to attend his own son's funeral, and he refuses to participate in the funeral prayer of his own son. For a beacon of love like Rumi, for someone whose whole entire existence is devoted to love and compassion and beauty, what must his own son have done to have warranted Rumi not attending the funeral of his own child?
و فکر میکنم کسانی اینو تعریف کردن که نمیتونستن بفهمن که این رابطه معنوی بین مولانا و شمس چی بوده. خود شمس به مولانا میگه که من یه روزی خواهم رفت، اون روزی که تو به قدر کافی پخته خواهی شد و دیگه به من احتیاج نخواهی داشت، من خواهم رفت. قبل از اونم یک بار رفته بود به سوریه و وقتی برگشت به مولانا گفت من این درد سفر رو بر خودم گرفتم برای که میدونم که تو نمیتونی سفر کنی و ضمناً میدونستم که جدایی تو رو پخته تر میکنه. بنابراین زحمت سفر رو کشیدم، رفتم برای اینکه تو بفهمی، برای اینکه تو بچشی که حضور چقدر عالیه و چقدر شیرینه و پخته تر بشی در از لحاظ معنوی. بعدش هم بهش میگه ولی یه روزی دوباره خواهم رفت، ولی اون موقع دیگه برای همیشه خواهم رفت، ولی تو اون موقع انقدر پخته هستی که بتونی بدون من سر بکنی، ادامه بدی، سیر سلوکت رو ادامه بدی. و یه روزی هم شمس پرنده میره، برای اینکه شمس هیچ جایی که پایبند نیست، کسی که نمیتونه شمس رو به زندان بندازه یا مجبورش بکنه جایی بمونه. شمس همیشه پرنده بوده، همیشه از اینجا به اونجا رفته. اصلا در کاراکتر شمسه که اینجوری باشه. منتها کارش رو انجام داده، پیش مولانا و رفته. و چیزی که به نظر من این رو تسکیب میکنه، حالا گذشته از تمام شواهدی که خود دکتر موحد در کتابشون راجع به شمس تبریزی میارن، چیزی که اینو واقعا به نظر من به وضوح به ما ثابت میکنه، حرفیه که سلطان ولد پسر مولانا در ولدنامه راجع به پدرش میزنه. میگوید وقتی که شمس غیبش زد، در واقع غیبت کرد، اول غیبت صغرا و بعد غیبت کبرا، یه کسی اومد به مولانا گفتش که مثل که شمس رو در شام دیدن یا در حلب یه جایی اونجا دیدن. خود مولانا این سفر رو کرد، رفت به طرف شام. وقتی که رسید اونجا یک تجربه معنوی کرد و سلطان ولد به ما میگه که شمس رو دید در درون خودش تابیده و متوجه شد که شمس خودشه و خودش شمسه. بنابراین دیگه احتیاجی به حضور ظاهری و جسمی شمس نداشت. واقعا به یه معنی، حالا اگه از این کلمه نترسیم، شمس در مولانا حلول کرد به یه معنی. واسه همینم که وقتی برگشت شروع کرد به سرودن اون غزلیاتی که تخلصش هست شمس.
Drives Maulana into a second round of what can only be described as heart-wrenching agony and depression. Until a day comes when he states, on this day, today, I became free from the love of Shams. And people are very surprised and they say, oh, don't you love your friend anymore? He says, I do. That love is eternal. But that love that I used to find in Shams, now I've come to discover inside my own self. The love that I used to always seek, the dignity, the beauty that I used to only be able to detect outside of myself, now I'm able to find inside as well. On this day, I became free from the love of Shams, not by stopping to care for my friend, but by seeing my friend everywhere.
When Shams left Rumi, it was very sad for Rumi. By the way, the myth was that Shams was killed by the students and so on and so forth. We now know this is not true. However, Shams said, I now have to leave. I am leaving you so that you will emerge as who you are. And separation is a cook, he said. Separation is a cook, and you will be cooked more profoundly. And for Rumi, it was a difficult thing. And his sadness, the beginning of Masnavi, you could actually say it's very much about separations, but not just Judai-ha in the plural. It's not just about separation from God, but other separations, including with his teacher. And he still has this sadness. So what happens there? When he starts writing the Masnavi, he has lost Shams, but he has found other people that remind him of Shams. So in this case, it's Husamuddin. So what happens is Husamuddin convinces Rumi that he should start writing the poetry and that they should go ahead and do the Sufi daur, the turning, and recite them. So it was again, Rumi was very interesting. He benefited from collaboration. He benefited from choosing other people to be part of his experience, of his expansion. And so when Husamuddin convinces him to do this, this is when we get the first lines of Masnavi, and the first lines of Masnavi are about sadness and separation. And we immediately understand that it's every human being has some sadness, being separated at the time of Alast and coming into this world, but also profoundly being separated from God, or being separated, in this case, from his beloved teacher, Shams.
اول نفس از نفس گسستن، اول قدم از قدم بریدن، نادیده گرفتنی جهان را، مردیده خویش را بدیدن. گفتم که دلا مبارکت باد، در حلقه عاشقان رسیدن.
Mawlana Rumi comes from this Persian Sufi tradition where music and rhythmic movements of the body are vehicles to arrive at God. Remember that for Mawlana Rumi, indeed for much of the Sufi tradition, music is not plucking away at a string or banging on a drum. Music for us is the very sound of the movement of heavenly spheres. There's something celestial about music. There's something heavenly about music.
Rumi's poetry often features the use of instruments like daf and ney to complement the meters and rhyme of his verses.
مرده بودم زنده شدم گریه بودم خنده شدم دولت عشق آمد و من دولت پاینده شدم موسیقی یعنی بالاتر.
He shows a clear appreciation for the ney, both as a musical instrument and as a reed pen. In the opening poems of the Masnavi, referred to as the Neyname, he expresses his sorrow over Shams's absence and contains numerous references to the ney. These are the only verses that Rumi wrote with his own hand.
خب میگیم نی اول البته ساز رو در نظر میاریم و فکر میکنیم که خب البته اون صدایی که صدای شعر فارسی چقدر شباهت داره با اون نفسی که از نی میاد بیرون و اون زیبایی که در واقع وقتی آدم حرف میزنه خب با نفس حرف میزنه، وقتی که نی میزنه با نفس نی میزنه. مولانا وقتی با این استعاره نی به ما میگه که من خود من وقتی که شعر میگم مثل یه نیم. یعنی چی؟ یعنی خالیم از خودم، خودم رو از خودم خالی کردم، پاک کردم از خودیت و بنابراین اون کسی، اون نفخه الهی در من میدمه و چون که از من میگذره، از منی که شعر رو بلدم بگم، تولید شعر میکنه، تولید مثنوی میکنه. یعنی که مثنوی همون نفخه الهیه که در نی مولانا دمیده شده. بعد نکات دیگه هم هست. برای اینکه نی رو خالی بکنن باید شرح حالا از فراغ اگر نباشه باید توش یک میله آهنین که اول گذاشتن تو آتش بذارن برای اینکه بتونن نی رو خالی بکنن. ضمناً این 18 بیتی که تنها 18 بیتی که ظاهراً مولانا به قلم خودش نوشته، با چه قلمی نوشته؟ با نی قلم نوشته. یعنی حتی اگه شعر آدم با دست بنویسه با نی می نویسه به یه معنی. میگه در واقع آتش نی همون آتش عشقه، اون آتشی که اجازه میده که من خودم رو از خودم خالی بکنم و بعد بشم سازی که درش خداوند میتونه بدمه. عشقه. آتش عشق برای اینه که ما بتونیم از خودمون بگذریم، آتیش بزنیم به جان خودمون و برسیم به جانان.
نه یه سازی هست که توش فوت میکنه، از توی روحتون فوت میکنه و روحتون این صدا رو در میاره. واسه همین این یک انس خاصی نسبت به شعرهای مثنوی و دیوان شمس و هم اصولاً با تصوف و درویش ها نی خیلی مهمه.
بشنو این نی چون حکایت میکند از شروع قضیه هستیه، از جدایی ها شکایت میکند.
And for Mawlana Rumi, his whole work of poetry has this intimate relationship to music and dance. His masterpiece, the Masnavi, begins with the word Bishno, Bishno, which is listen, listen. And the supreme musical act for Rumi is this exercise called Sama, Sema in modern Turkish, and the gatherings of music and dance and poetry, Sama. And Sama means deep listening.
با لب دمساز خود گر جفتمی، همچو نی من گفتنی ها گفتمی.
Real music picks you up and lifts you up. That's the way that Mawlana approached music. So he and his followers would have these soirees, these jam sessions, right? Today, when you attend the Whirling Dervishes ceremony, you see the dervishes very gracefully whirling and slowly turning about themselves. It's a beautiful, meditative experience to witness it. And that kind of a whirling, dance, if you want to call it that, it's praying with the body, praying through the body, is very different than how Mawlana and his followers used to do it. It was much more spontaneous, much less orchestrated, more wild. We know that they used to bring candles which were so big that 2 to 4 men would be needed to lift up each one of them. Right? They would place these giant candles in the corners of the room so that the room could be lit, so that they could keep dancing.
Rumi has been very much in the American consciousness since really the beginning of the 20th century, if not earlier. And we had not a great deal of Rumi. We didn't have all of the Masnavi, but there were already quotations, and we knew about this because there were a lot of the American poets and philosophers had become interested in Rumi. Some of the main elements, or at least what the Western world regarded as the main elements, were attractive to people. I would say the main one would be, of course, Rumi's doctrine of love, and the particular way that he brings the idea of passionate love. Ishq he brings into to a culture such as our own that doesn't quite grasp that idea in the particular way that he brings it. And so the notion of all love having one root, all love, whether human love, whether love for God, love for nature, whatever, that the doctrine that it is all one love.
When we read Mawlana, it was like, my God, this is like, this is from another planet. This is just amazing. This is like a rocket ship. And so we decided that we needed to go to Iran and learn Persian so that we could read it in the original. If it's this good in translation, what must it be? And also immerse ourselves in the culture that produced, Mawlana. And I must say that when we went to Iran, we were in Shiraz, and in Shiraz they didn't have any special program for, Persian for foreigners. And so we jumped right in at the deep end. We started immediately reading Divan Shams. And we met this dervish who had a fantastic way of interpreting Divan Shams. He didn't know English. We would write the words down phonetically, and then we would ask our home family to write them in Persian for us, and then we would go to the dictionary and we would collect a vocabulary for ourselves. But we started directly with Divan Shams. We didn't start with, Farsi 101. We started directly with Divan Shams and with this dervish who had this fantastic, insight into the inner meanings of Mawlana, and that was the whole reason we went to Iran, and we got bitten by the bug of the love of Persian culture and literature and art.
Sufism was a tradition that touched my heart, and I began to feel at home. I guess I knew it was my spiritual home. And this was through meeting some of the living representatives of Sufi tradition, particularly in the tradition of Rumi. Camille and I had begun to study Farsi with a tutor in a small town in New Hampshire. And I began my study of Farsi by actually translating the ghazals of Mawlana. We began to publish some of the first of a new wave of translations of Rumi that came into North America.
Rumi, what he has done is astonishing. He has grammatically, philosophically, poetically stated beautiful truths about the path so easily, so clearly, in the simple statements that he gives, profound And these people take into their heart, and they cannot lose them because they're so profound.
Sufism is about coming to the essence, and the meaning of the word tasawwuf is self-purification. But what's being purified? Actually, Shams says it very clearly. He says we have to empty ourselves of our feeling of I-ness. And that I-ness is the superficial I-ness that's in our thinking minds, in our random emotions and desires. It's not yet the deeper I-ness that we are striving for. Rumi says something quite extraordinary. He talks about a moment when your last unreal self meets your first real self.
The wonderful thing about Sufism and all spirituality, but in the case of Rumi Sufism, is that he leads any seeker into an experiential understanding, not a philosophical understanding. He leads them into a place where it may take a little bit of time or a lot of time, but he brings them to a place where their normal consciousness, their normal way of seeing the world, of these senses, he teaches all of these dervishes, aspirants, it could be someone who never heard of it, but he teaches to bring the consciousness down to here. We have an awareness of ourselves, sometimes negative awareness, sometimes arrogant awareness. We vacillate in our own awareness, and we are aware to some extent of the world around us. And so this is our consciousness of being. It could be consciousness of politics and so forth, but we're talking about the consciousness of selfhood. And the problem with the consciousness of selfhood as we know it is that we don't understand, most of us, that we are like waves on the ocean, and that the waves, they have a purpose. The wind, hawa, blows across the ocean and bring God's will for the divine names. There is a purpose. It's intended that we should be like the wave. It pleases God that we are like the wave. But if we really want to know the self, we will have to drop down into the ocean, within the ocean. And this is sadr. So the whole doctrine that Rumi has is based on the activation of sadr.
And transformation is a key word in Sufism. That's what it's all about. Sufism is not about listening to moralizing sermons. It's not about winning rewards for heaven or avoiding sins to escape the punishments of hell. It's way beyond that. It assumes that we begin as basically moral human beings with healthy selves or egos, healthy egos. But the ego has to be transformed. And Shams would say that, we have to, that all our problems come from our repeating I and me and me and I. So we have to empty ourselves completely of that, of those I's, of all those me's, to come to know our essential self, which is where we are closest to the divine.
We also learn the practice that Rumi teaches, the practice for doing zikr and so forth. Then literally the awareness drops, and it drops to a place where it is actually God who is experiencing himself. We become real because we no longer know our own self, but we are allowed to participate in God's own view of himself. So I know this is kind of a strange thing, but this is the truth. This is what happens.
The training of the mystic is the work of the heart, the awakening of the heart, because it's through the heart and only through the heart that we can know true reality, or in other words, know the divine, and know our true relationship to the divine, and find that indwelling light of the divine that's at the core of every soul. And this can't be done merely through techniques, nor even through any moral education. It assumes that. It's accomplished through, above all, through an awakening of love. First, perhaps, between two human beings, between a murshid and a murid, for instance, but ultimately leading to falling in love with God. And the only way you can fall in love with God is to know God's beauty. It's that beauty that will awaken love in us. And first, maybe we discover that beauty through other human beings who embody the beautiful qualities of God in relationship with good adab, as we say. Well, Shams in his maqalat does tell us that a little bit of time with a true murshid is more valuable than 70 years on the prayer carpet. That's what he says. So both he and Rumi give a lot of importance to a relationship with someone who has matured on the path, someone who is who is like the ripened fruit on the tree of Sufism. There are also spiritual practices that are essential and which are part of the program, because we also need to train our attention to be able to be aware of the divine, to be aware of our conscience, to begin to notice our own egoism. And there is a methodology that has been created and has been sustained for centuries, in which, through a network of relationships in, let's say, a Sufi Khanaka or Derga, and all the relationships embodied there under the light of a murshid, ideally, under the light of a living tradition with a peer like Rumi and Shams, then in that environment, which is a school of continuous education for the spiritual seeker, one is exposed again and again and again to teachings of wisdom. What Rumi and Shams brought into the world is not something that belongs to the 13th century. It's something that humanity has yet to aim for, has yet to achieve and realize its true value. So this is a teaching sourced more than 7 centuries ago, but it is a guidance for the unfolding development of human consciousness and maturity. It is a teaching of the future more than of the past. Rumi's Mesnevi and the Ghazals, it's not random, it's not confused, it has a profound underlying clarity. But of course, it takes time to be able to recognize it, understand it, and in the end, try to embody it.
ای خدا جان را تو بنما آن مقام کاندرو به حرف می روید کلام تا که سازد جان پاک از سر قدم سوی عرصه دور پهنای عدم. The meaning there is the profound teaching of Rumi. He's saying, oh God, show the sincere seeker, Ay Khuda Jan Ra Tu Benma on Maqam, that station where the divine names they are merging with no letters. Ay Khuda Jan Ra Tu Benma on Maqam, Kandaru be harf miruyad kalam, ta ke sazad jan pak as sar qadam, so arsay dur pahnay adam, so that the head is rushing headlong into vastness, sadr. Rushing headlong into vastness, God's vastness, you see?
Rumi found inspiration in nature, viewing it as a reflection of the beauty of the divine. There is a story that hammering of blacksmiths sparked Rumi's famous whirling dance. However, a historian from the Mevlevi order believes that Rumi learned the art of whirling from Shams. This meditative dance has its origins in the distant past, dating back at least 200 years before Rumi, and possibly even earlier. Rumi often paired his verses with the whirling dance, and many of his poems were intended to be sung during Sufi mystical performances.
Music and poetry and dance for Rumi are to begin with the body, to begin with the external senses, and then turn within and discover that you have other senses within, that you have the eye of the heart and the ear of the heart and the tongue of the heart, and to activate each one of them so that silence doesn't become the absence of words, and it's not the absence of sound, it's the opening into which you hear the silent, quiet, and yet unmistakable voice of God coming from within.
The ancient festival of Pir Shaliyar in Kurdistan, Iran, has roots that date back to Zoroastrian times.
While the festival has largely retained its original ritual, some Islamic influences can be observed in certain aspects. The festival consists of several parts that take place over a few days. One notable segment features dervishes performing a trance-like dance to the sound of the daf, a traditional drum. This may provide a glimpse into how some dervishes dance during Rumi's time. The songs during their dance performances include Rumi's poetry.
There are various Sufi orders that incorporate Rumi's teachings. However, the Mevlevi order, founded by Rumi's son, Sultan Walad, originated in Konya. To this day, the Mevlevi order has flourished and is practiced in several countries. While they have refined the whirling dance, other Sufi orders also practice whirling.
Mevlana insanların hiçbirini ayırmadan ne hangi dilde, hangi ırkta, hangi mezhepte olursa olsun gel ne olursan ol gel diyerek insanları birleştirmiş. Ateşe de tapsan, puta da tapsan, hiçbir şeye inanmasan da gel diyerek bu dergahın ümitsizlik yolu olmadığını, ümitsizlik makamı olmadığını göstermiş ve bütün insanlığa kucak açmıştır. Semazenler, dervişler sema ederken, meydana çıkarken üstlerinde bir hırkayla çıkarlar. O hırka dünyayı temsil eder, dünya hayatını temsil eder. Semaya başlamadan önce hırka çıkarılır ve içindeki kıyafet, beyaz kıyafet onların kefenini temsil etmektedir. Başımızdaki sikke mezar taşımızdır. Belimize sardığımız siyah kuşak elif harfini temsil eder. Ve o hırkayı çıkardığı andan itibaren semazen artık dünyadan çıkmış ve manevi hayata yolculuğa başlamıştır. Sema esnasında da yine tamamen kalbini, ruhunu ve beynini boşaltarak kendisini sadece Allah'ı düşünerek ve iman ederek semaya geçirir ve bu sayede dünyayla ilişkisini sema süresi boyunca keser. Sema esnasında sol ayak yerden kalkmaz, sol ayağın altında nefsimizin olduğu temsil edilmektedir ve o nefsi açığa çıkarmamak için sol ayak yerden kaldırılmaz ve sağ ayak onun etrafında döndürülür. Semada dikkat edilecek hususlardan biri sağ el yukarıya bakar, sol el aşağıya bakar. Allah'tan, haktan alıp halka vermeyi temsil eder bu hareket. Ve 4 selamlık bir sema sonucundan sonra tekrar hırka giyilerek dünyaya dönüşün temsil edildiği gösterilir ve sema ayini sonlandırılır. Semazenlerin sema esnasında çok fazla etrafla bir ilişkisi olmaz. Sadece müziği dinler, müziğe kulak verir ve Allah'la kendi arasında bir irtibat kurmaya çalışır. Ona mümkün olduğu kadar yaklaşmaya çalışır. Bu sayede maneviyatını, ruhunu temizlemesine yardımcı olur. Biz paylaşmayı bilmediğimiz için ve özellikle ülkeler ve insanlar her şeye sahip olmak istedikleri için o da benim olsun, bu da benim olsun, şu da benim olsun dedikleri için paylaşmayı beceremediğimiz için maalesef dünya kaynaklarını büyük bir hızla tüketiyoruz ve belki de kısa vadede paylaşan, her şeyi birlikte yaşayan insanların olduğu bir dünyada.
From an illness in December 1273, at the age of 66, Rumi had a premonition of his own death, and he wrote his final verses. Rumi died in 1273 in Konya, Turkey, and was buried next to his father in a shrine now known as the Green Tomb. The construction of his tomb was commissioned by a Georgian princess.
What Rumi's lineage has always said, and I think this is perhaps the best answer, it is not the grave that makes the site holy, but the love and the prayers and the tears and the poems of the lovers who've been coming to that site for centuries. It's the love that makes the place holy, not the place that makes the love holy.
Mawlana Museum, along with its mausoleum, mosque, dance hall, and the dervish school and living quarters, remains a timeless beacon of inspiration to this day.
Do not seek us under the earth after we are gone, for our abode will become the bosom of the mystics.